One of the greatest aspects of the Monday Night Wars between WWE and WCW was when a wrestler would jump ship and make a surprise appearance on Monday Nitro or Monday Night Raw. We look at the debuts of Lex Luger on the very first episode of Nitro and Chris Jericho's WWE debut in a segment with The Rock as the most prominent examples in this era. With the advent of All Elite Wrestling, AEW, we once again can get this feeling once more, and while the prevalence of the internet makes debuts incredibly hard to be truly surprising, that doesn't entirely take away all the fun from them. Pardon the wrestling, but I am Bryan, and today we look at AEW's best debuts in its near 5-year history. If you're new to the channel, don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more content just like this. And if you're a fan of professional wrestling, hit the like button as well, as that is the easiest way for your fellow wrestling fans to find this video. Thanks to the incredible support of our viewers, we have already surpassed the 1,000 subscriber mark. Due to this, we are now partnered on YouTube, and you can go further in your support for this channel by becoming a member of the PTW Universe. You'll get shoutouts and videos, Saturday night access to our weekly flagship Sunday Primetime PTW videos, and starting in July, our full-length reviews of the original NXT. Competition brings out the best in you, and this is no different for wrestling. Since 2001, WWE has been without a legitimate contender for supremacy in the professional wrestling landscape. AEW has forced WWE to up their game, and I think it is fairly objective to say that WWE has gotten significantly better since Tony Khan entered the wrestling game. With a viable alternative for wrestlers to find employment, it's become a legit possibility for wrestlers to move between companies when contracts expire. WWE has lost more to AEW than the other way around, and with that, we take a trip down memory lane and rate the top 10 debuts in AEW coming from WWE or otherwise. Full disclosure, while hearing the coin drop on the Dynamite leading into Forbidden Door was an amazing first time at seeing Kazuchika Okada in AEW, he is not signed to All Elite Wrestling, and moments like this will not be included. These wrestlers have to be officially signed to AEW in one way or another. So without further ado, let's get to it. Number 10, Mark Briscoe. Earlier this year, we sadly lost Jay Briscoe as the result of an automobile accident, and as we've discussed on this channel before, Jay's death was felt throughout the entire wrestling world. Having been a perennial fixture in Ring of Honor and the independent scene, so many top wrestlers in 2023 have in one way or another crossed paths with the Briscoes. Guys like Seth Rollins, Kevin Owens, Bryan Danielson, CM Punk, and the Young Bucks have all shared a locker room with Mark and Jay Briscoe. We won't get into the why they weren't allowed on TNT or TBS, as this isn't the place for that, but before Jay's passing, the Briscoes were simply not allowed to appear on WBD television due to remarks Jay had made some time ago. So while the Briscoes were a part of the AEW banner working for Ring of Honor, they never appeared on an All Elite Wrestling show proper. After Jay's passing, Tony Khan and AEW would receive the blessing from WBD to allow Mark to appear on television for AEW, and on January 25th, 2023, a week after Jay's passing, Mark Briscoe appeared on an episode of AEW Dynamite for the first time. Jay Lethal has been a cornerstone in the career of the Briscoes, and he was picked as the opponent for Mark Briscoe's AEW debut, and it was an incredibly emotional moment to witness. From the moment "Reach for the sky, boy" blared through our TV sets to the 1, 2, 3, you wouldn't be blamed if you couldn't hold back tears. Number 9, Keith Lee. Keith Lee's debut into AEW was one that was highly anticipated and delivered in a fantastic way. Last year in the lead up to AEW Revolution, there were qualifying matches for the face of the Revolution ladder match. Isaiah Cassidy was in the ring already awaiting his opponent, and once his opponent's music went off and the graphic displayed on the screen, the crowd in Atlantic City lost their minds. This is the same Dynamite that featured Punk and Moxley vs FTR, as well as Lance Archer vs Hangman for the AEW Championship in a Texas death match, so it was an incredibly newsworthy show from top to bottom. Inside the match itself, it had one of my most rewatched moments in the first quarter of the year for AEW when Keith Lee absolutely launched Isaiah Cassidy. Keith Lee brings with him an incredible beast of a man with agility and athleticism that wouldn't be out of place in the X division. Alongside that, Keith Lee has incredible charisma that paired extremely well with his brief tag team partner Swerve Strickland. Keith Lee's booking aside, his debut in AEW was incredibly anticipated, as many fans had seen what he was capable of doing down in NXT for the WWE, and while there's time for him to ascend higher on the ladder, there is no taking away from his incredible debut on AEW Dynamite. Number 8, Jeff Hardy. Earlier we had talked about how the internet has made it incredibly hard to be surprised about debuts, and Jeff Hardy may be one of the worst kept secrets for AEW debuts. Among the ways we were spoiled was the constant reporting that AEW was able to obtain rights to the classic Hardy Boys theme from the Attitude Era, since the song was a part of the public domain and was not owned by WWE. All the internet spoilers couldn't erase this awesome moment. His brother Matt Hardy was in the midst of a feud with Andrade El Idolo as part of the AHFO, and one that would see his alleged kids, Private Party, turn their backs on Matt. Once that happened, the beatdown was on and it was a 6-on-1 advantage against Matt Hardy. Matt would initially be saved by Darby Allin and Sting, but the numbers were still heavily in the heel's favor. Not much longer, that very familiar music would hit the arena speakers with the crowd exploding. It was only fitting that the man who signed Jeff and Matt to their first wrestling contract, Jim Ross, was on the call for this one. The crowd absolutely ate up this debut, and seeing Jeff in an AEW ring across from Darby and Sting was a great moment. Number 7, Roderick Strong. You want to talk about surprising? This was an absolute surprise for nearly everybody, including insiders of the business. Roderick Strong has been a perennial mainstay in NXT for quite some time, being a part of the Diamond Mine group that included the Creed brothers. Injuries had plagued Roddy for some time, and over the course of the years, you would see many of his wrestling friends leave the company, such as Adam Cole, Bobby Fish, and Kyle O'Reilly, his cohorts in the Undisputed Era. While in the middle of a beatdown from the Jericho Appreciation Society, it looked like all was lost for Adam Cole until Kill Switch Engage's End of Heartache started blaring through the arena speakers. Not much longer after the intro guitar riff, we would see Roderick Strong's name show up on the big screen, and out he came. In a wrestling world that is often filled with surprises that are leaked or straight up spoiled, this was an amazing moment for an amazing wrestler. This is the freshest debut in AEW in regards to recency of it happening on this list, so there's plenty of time to make this even more special down the line. But it provided a legit markout moment for fans in attendance and at home, and the fact that Roddy even got End of Heartache back after using it before was an awesome cherry on top. Number 6, William Regal. This was such an incredible debut and the only one on this list featuring a non-wrestler. In the lead up to AEW Revolution 2022, Danielson and Moxley were set on a collision course due to Danielson approaching Moxley about leading the next generation of professional wrestlers. Moxley wouldn't trust someone he hasn't bled with, and off to the races we went. We were treated to several great matches during the show, including the dog collar match between Punk and MJF, and Hangman vs. Adam Cole for the championship, but this match had an incredibly different feel compared to those two. Eventually we would get to the finish, which would see Moxley get a clever pinning combination on Danielson for the victory. Despite this, the two would continue to go at each other in the post-match before, out of nowhere, William Regal appeared walking on the floor adjacent to the entrance ramp. He would eventually yell at both men before slapping them and instructing them to shake hands. And with this, the Blackpool Combat Club was officially born. Regal and AEW provided us some incredible moments, including the promo segments with MJF, as well as his general association with Moxley, Danielson, Wheeler Yuta, and Claudio Castagnoli. And unfortunately, his time was short in AEW as he desired to work with his son back in WWE, as well as Paul Levesque, who had regained some creative power since his departure from WWE initially. Regal's involvement in the formation of one of AEW's best factions in its history is not something to be taken lightly, and his inclusion in this list is a testament to how important his time with AEW was, despite its brevity. Number 5, Claudio Castagnoli. Back-to-back Blackpool Combat Club debuts, it just had to be destiny. At Forbidden Door last year, Bryan Danielson was set to face Zack Sabre Jr. in what would have been an absolute banger of a match. However, an injury kept the American Dragon out of the monumental crossover event between AEW and New Japan. Danielson had a replacement for the match, and before we get a look at the entrance, we see the crowd in Chicago immediately react to a huge ovation, as surely what they saw on screen was the Switzerland Cross. There was also a strong indication that Claudio was AEW bound sooner or later after not re-signing with WWE, and this was just too good of an opportunity. Claudio soaked in the moment as he absolutely should, and would go on to have what should be no surprise to anybody, a great match with the future New Japan World Television Champion. In fact, it was loved so much that of all the matches at Forbidden Door last year, it ranked the second highest on Cage Match, only behind Will Ospreay and Orange Cassidy. Claudio, since debuting in AEW, went on to win his first World Championship in the form of the ROH Championship, and has won it twice and is currently in his second reign as its champion. While there are more successful AEW careers to discuss in the rest of this list, Claudio has done incredibly well and is a significant reason why the Blackpool Combat Club is one of the best acts in AEW at the moment. Number 4, Sting. This was a moment so awesome that the powers that be at Turner Television and WBD were actually mad they didn't have it advertised. In December of 2020, during the Winter is Coming special for AEW Dynamite, the Nightmare family featuring Cody and Dustin Rhodes, as well as Darby and Arn Anderson, were getting obliterated by Team Taz. Next thing you know, the lights would go out and a very epic interlude would start playing on the speakers at Daly's place. On the big screen was an imagery of a forest as well as a crow before the word Sting would appear on the big screen. Rightfully so, Tony Schiavone and Jim Ross were on the call for this one, prominently discussing how it was the very first time Sting had been on TNT in nearly 20 years after the final episode of WCW Nitro. It was truly a moment that will give you chills to this day, and the only bad thing I would say about this particular debut is it didn't get a chance to happen in front of a larger audience due to the pandemic. Despite that, the sheer surprise of the moment and the future acknowledgement of who Sting would go on to align himself with made for not only a top debut in AEW, but a legit top moment in its history. You're not going to get some amazing one-on-one match with Sting in this decade, and in fact he hasn't had a singles match since Night of Champions 2015 against Seth Rollins, but despite this he has gone all out in his time with AEW, and it's great to see considering how big of a letdown his first and only run in WWE was a few years prior. Number 3, Jon Moxley. If you've been an AEW fan for a few years and you have reached number 3 on this list, there's a very good chance you not only know the order, but agree with it. On the flip side, there's a good chance you would argue the order, but not the content. You'd be hard pressed to determine a better set of 3 debuts than the ones we are going to be talking about, and honestly, if there wasn't a particular circumstance surrounding the number 1 on this list, I would almost rank Moxley's debut as number 1 for a multitude of reasons. Then you may say, well, if that's the case, why is Moxley number 2 on this list? But when we discuss number 2, you'll understand why. Moxley's debut at Double or Nothing 2019 was very similar to Regal's debut, in which it didn't feature music and was one of those classic WCW debuts in which the moment itself was the music. Jericho was in the ring doing a post-match promo, and suddenly the camera is focused on the former Dean Ambrose walking through the crowd and heading towards the ring. Anyone that has followed Jon Moxley's entire career had to be absolutely excited to see his debut. Knowing what he is fully capable of without restraints just meant you were about to see some incredible television. Jericho did an amazing job selling disbelief at seeing Moxley in an AEW ring for the first time. Moxley would drop Jericho and even referee Paul Turner with a paradigm shift DDT, and he would go for one on Kenny Omega as well, but Omega fought out of it and they would eventually start brawling through the Las Vegas crowd. Moxley would get the paradigm shift he was looking for on Omega by dropping Kenny on top of the poker chips on the entrance stage, and it would go on to create one of AEW's most iconic moments in its short history. Number 2, Bryan Danielson and Adam Cole. Call it cheating, call it whatever you will, but I'll always combine these 2 debuts into one. And with that said, you see why this has an unfair advantage against Moxley. It goes to show you how important the entirety of the Blackpool Combat Club is, considering 80% of its members were featured on this list. All Out 2021 had CM Punk's first match in over 7 years, as well as the classic Steel Cage tag team match between the Lucha Bros and the Young Bucks. In the show's main event, All Out 2021 featured Kenny Omega versus Christian Cage for the AEW World Championship. After the match, Kenny got on the mic and said he has beaten all there is, which is always a surefire hint that someone is going to come out. Suddenly, the lights went out and music played with Adam Cole's name appearing on the screen. And if it wasn't clear by him walking out, Adam Cole's shirt said, "All Elite, baby." Many people in attendance and at home initially thought Kenny's challenge was being answered by Adam Cole. In the ring already was Doc Gallows, Carl Anderson, the Young Bucks, and Don Callis. They had previously laid out Luchasaurus and Jungle Boy, who were both aligned with Christian at this time. Initially, Adam Cole and Kenny were mouthing off at each other, and out of nowhere, Adam Cole super kicked Jungle Boy. Adam Cole would go on to embrace the Elite, and Kenny once again grabbed the mic and confirmed that this was his plan all along. And just like Kenny said a few moments prior, Adam said there's no one that is going to stop the most dominant faction in wrestling, the Elite. And as Kenny was saying his goodbye line, the Flight of Valkyries rang through the speakers, and we retreated to a second debut during the segment with the arrival of the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson. Once Danielson hit the ring, it was an all-out, no pun intended, brawl in the suburbs of Chicago. It was quite possibly one of the greatest endings to a wrestling pay-per-view, and like many other entrants on this list, this wasn't only a great debut, this was a great moment for AEW. Before we get to the obvious number 1 on this list, if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn that bell notification on for more content just like this. And if you've liked this list so far, be sure to hit the like button as well so more wrestling fans can find this video. And the number one debut in AEW history, CM Punk. This wasn't a surprise debut once AEW Rampage in Chicago at the United Center was announced. AEW has let things leak, so to speak, and that is how the United Center was sold out on a rumor. Rampage was coming up on its second episode in August of 2021, and over the show's history, we know how incredibly rare it has been for Rampage to be taped live on Fridays. CM Punk's return to wrestling was viewed as one of wrestling's worst kept secrets, yet it was still an incredible sight to behold at the time. Following Punk's departure from WWE, his subsequent podcast discussion with Colt Cabana, amongst other ways of putting down the wrestling business, it seemed incredibly unlikely that CM Punk would ever find himself inside of a wrestling ring ever again. Yet the birth of AEW would bring forth that possibility. His debut at Rampage wasn't the first time AEW has tried bringing in Punk, as he really wanted to see if AEW could truly be a successful alternative to WWE. Nonetheless, when Cult of Personality played at the United Center opening up Rampage, we had truly seen AEW make it, so to speak. And that is not to downplay any of the debuts on the list, many preceding this particular one, but to attract CM Punk, one of wrestling's most notorious personalities and undoubtedly one of wrestling's best draws in the modern era, it was monumental for AEW to land CM Punk. Punk went on to win the AEW Championship a couple times and had one of AEW's best programs with MJF. But the incredible goodwill Punk has had as a cult hero has certainly subdued over the last year after what happened at All Out 2022's press conference. But that's a story for another day. Punk had the Chicago crowd and, of course, by extension, the entire wrestling world in his hands that night on Rampage. It got to a point where it became an expected moment, but looking at the entire history of professional wrestling, it is AEW's most unlikely debut, yet here we are. And that will do it for our top 10 AEW debuts. What did you think? Is there one that didn't make the list that should have? Let us know in the comment section down below. If you're watching this after Forbidden Door 2023, let us know what you thought of Okada vs Danielson and other matches as well. And if this is your first time here, don't forget to hit the subscribe button to stay up to date with new videos such as this every single Sunday. And hit the like button as well, as that is the easiest way to help other wrestling fans find this video. Once again, thank you for your support, and we'll catch you on the next one.